A few months ago, I needed a break. Life in the city was fast and stressful. I thought a cabin retreat in the Cascade Mountains would help me recharge. I'm not an expert in the outdoors, but I've camped before. The cabin looked nice in the photos, rustic but cozy. When I arrived, I felt the chill in the air. The snow-covered trees surrounded me. It was quiet, almost too quiet. I never expected what would happen next. On the first night, I settled in and tried to relax. I made a cup of coffee and sank into the couch. Outside, I heard footsteps crunching in the snow. I froze. It was probably an animal, I thought. I flipped the light off and peeked through the window. Nothing was there, just white. My heart raced, but I went to bed, convincing myself I was being silly. The next morning, things got weird. I made coffee, but when I went to brush my teeth, I found my mug in the bathroom. I swore I left it on the kitchen counter. I felt uneasy, but I brushed it off as forgetting things. The day went by without incident, but when I found my jacket hanging over a chair later, a chill crept down my spine. I didn't remember doing that. Was someone else here? I had seen no one. That night, the footsteps returned, louder this time. It sounded like someone was pacing outside my window. I got up, heart racing again. I looked outside, but the snow glistened in the moonlight, and there was nothing. But then I heard whispers. They floated through the trees almost like soft laughter. I shook my head. It had to be the wind. Still, that uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. I tried to distract myself with movies and snacks, but every creak in the cabin sent my mind spiraling. I grabbed my phone, but there was no service. I thought about calling someone for help, but who would believe me? I felt trapped. I paced around the cabin, staring into the corners. Shadows danced wherever I looked. On my last night, everything felt different. The air was thick. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I turned off the lights, listening intently. The whispers returned, crawling into the silence. I stood there, frozen, waiting for something to happen. Then I heard it. My name, soft and inviting. Mark. I stepped closer to the window. The moon shined bright, but shadows crept around. I didn't want to look outside again, but I could not stop myself. When I looked out, everything went cold. I saw a figure standing among the trees, half hidden by darkness. My breathing stopped. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My heart pounded in my chest. I blinked, and the figure vanished. Even now, I can't shake that feeling. Was something out there? I still feel like someone's watching me, even in the city. I can't forget those unsettling whispers. What was out there waiting for me? I fled the cabin the next morning. There was no way I could stay another night. My mind was racing with the memories of my final moments there. I thought driving back to the city would leave my fear behind, but it lingered. The roads were icy, and I felt every bump and turn as if they could toss me off balance. I tried to shake it off by blasting music, but it only made the familiar silence feel heavier. Once home, I told myself it was over. I tried to go back to work as if nothing happened, but every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that cabin. The whispers echoed, creeping into my mind, pushing me into a state of anxiety. I decided to drive to a coffee shop to distract myself. As I walked in, the warmth enveloped me, but the moment I ordered my drink, I spotted something out of the corner of my eye. It was a note on the ground by the entrance. It was tucked slightly under a chair, as if someone had dropped it carelessly. I picked it up, feeling a wave of unease pull through me again. The note had no date, but the handwriting was neat, almost elegant. It said, "He will always be watching. Don't let him find you." My hands shook. I wanted to dismiss it, to chalk it up to some bizarre prank. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected to my experience in the cabin. How could someone know about it? My coffee was ready, and I took it, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. I headed out, clutching the note. When I got to my car, I stopped. I looked around. Was I being followed? It felt like every stranger was a potential threat. I quickly climbed into my car, locking the doors behind me. That night, I tried to distract myself once more. I turned on the TV and flipped through channels with no real interest until a news report caught my attention. A local man had gone missing near the Cascades, a few miles from my cabin. The report mentioned the area's haunting history, filled with stories of those who had vanished without a trace. My heart dropped. I felt the shadows creeping around me again, settling into my living room like a thick fog. I grabbed my phone, intending to call someone, anyone, but I hesitated. Who would I tell? I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was chasing me had now crossed over to my reality. Suddenly the lights flickered. A cold breeze swept through the room despite the windows being shut. I jumped. Was I imagining it? Then, out of the corner of my vision, I saw something. A shadow moving past the window. My breath caught in my throat. I rushed to the window, pulling back the curtain, but the street was empty, just darkness, just silence. I backed away, my heart racing, and sealed the curtain shut. I couldn't bear the thought of something looking in at me. That night I lay awake, clutching the note beside me. I thought about returning to the cabin, confronting whatever had lingered there. Maybe then I could find peace, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over yet. Then I heard that soft, inviting voice again. Mark. My blood ran cold. I froze, the sound wrapping around me like an icy hand. My name echoed softly in the dark, a chilling reminder of my unsettled mind. I looked around the room, expecting to see someone or something lurking in the shadows. Hello? I called out, my voice shaking. No answer came, just the steady tick of the clock on the wall. Was I losing it? Perhaps it was the sleepless nights taking their toll. I peered into the darkness where the voice had come from, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I couldn't shake a tangled mix of dread and curiosity. I had faced my fears by running away, but maybe it was time to confront them instead. Shoving the note into my pocket, I grabbed a flashlight. I debated calling a friend, but I couldn't explain what was happening. They would think I was losing it, and I didn't want to deal with that. Instead, I pushed myself to stand, determined to investigate the sound. I tiptoed to my front door, feeling the floorboards creak beneath my weight. Each step was heavy with anticipation, like stepping into a trap. I opened the door and stepped outside, shivering against the cold. The night was still and quiet, an eerie calm settling around me. My heart raced as I scanned the darkness, almost expecting to see a figure waiting for me. But there was nothing, just shadows and the faint rustle of trees. I turned on my flashlight and aimed the beam into the yard. It cut through the darkness like a knife, revealing nothing but the stillness of the night. But just as I lowered the light, I saw something in the distance, a small figure darting between the trees. My breath hitched. It was too far away to see clearly, but my instincts screamed at me to run back inside. I hesitated, my feet glued to the ground. I held my breath, waiting. Would they come closer? Or was it just my imagination playing tricks? Just as I started to turn back, the figure appeared again, this time closer. It was small, almost childlike, and it stood at the edge of the trees facing me. Mark, the voice whispered again, softer this time. A shiver ran down my spine. What do you want? I yelled, my voice trembling. No response. The figure remained still. I could feel the weight of its gaze, and the air turned thick with tension. Was it drawing me in, or warning me away? I took a cautious step forward, my heart pounding. Who are you? I asked, desperate for an answer. The figure only seemed to flicker, like a failing bulb. That was when I noticed something glinting in the grass, a small object shining in the beam of my flashlight, drawing my attention. Crouching down, I reached for it and found a pendant shaped like a key. Its surface was cold and coated in a thin layer of frost. As I turned it over in my hand, I caught a glimpse of the figure again, now closer, its eyes wide and pleading. Instinct kicked in, and a wave of terror washed over me. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding, turning back toward the house. Then everything went dark. The flashlight flickered out, plunging me into an overwhelming void. Panic gripped me as I fumbled for the door. I couldn't breathe. "Mark," the voice sang again, echoing all around me. I was not alone. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying the darkness would dissolve. My pulse thrummed in my ears. I felt a sharp chill ripple over my skin, and an intense pressure in the air made it hard to breathe. What was happening? I forced myself to think. Desperate for light, I frantically pressed the button on my flashlight. Nothing. It was dead. The realization hit me harder than I expected. The sound of my heartbeat felt deafening in the silence. I was standing there in the dark, completely vulnerable. With no other choice, I took a deep breath and turned toward the house. But as I did, I heard a soft giggle, sharp and fleeting, like a child's laughter carried by the wind. I froze again. That laugh hadn't come from me, or anyone I knew. "Mark," the voice whispered, unmistakably closer. I could feel a gentle breeze dance around me, stirring the hairs on my arms. I felt drawn toward it, yet I fought the pull. I had to get inside. Stumbling backward, I fished for the doorknob behind me, my sweaty palms slipping on the cold metal until finally I grasped it. The door swung open with an uneasy creak. I dashed inside, closing it abruptly behind me, and pressed my back against the wooden frame. My hands trembled as I fumbled to lock it, and I took a moment to gather my breath. The familiar smell of my home filled my senses, yet it felt alien, as if I had stepped into a different world. I kicked off my shoes, desperate to shake off that feeling of cold terror. I moved deeper into the house, instinctively looking for any signs of life. The only sound was my breath, ragged and fast. Hastily, I turned on the living room light. The warm glow sought to dispel the darkness, but couldn't chase away the feeling of dread. Tossing the key pendant onto the coffee table, I noticed something that stopped me cold. All the windows were shut tight, the curtains drawn. There was no way for anyone or anything to get in, wasn't there? I picked up the pendant again, turning it over, searching for some clue. A faint inscription caught my eye on the back. "Open what must be opened." Beneath it, a small engraving of a door barely discernible. What did that mean? Suddenly, there was a loud thud from the back of the house. I jumped at the sound, adrenaline surging through my veins. The dining room led to the dark corridor that connected to the garage. Through the stillness of the house, it felt like every fear I had kept at bay had come crashing down on me. I needed to see what it was. Slowly, I moved toward the hallway, the pendant clutched tightly in my fist. Each step felt heavy, as if I were trudging through thick mud. The light flickered overhead, casting erratic shadows that twisted and turned, making the walls seem alive. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the corridor, the silence wrapping around me like a shroud. Then, from the corner of my eye, something moved. I whipped around, but there was nothing. My heart raced. I was not alone. And now I was certain of it. That's when I saw it. A door at the end of the hallway that I had never noticed before, slightly ajar and emanating an inviting glow. It became impossible to resist. I felt drawn toward it, almost against my will. A slow terror crept in, and despite all my instincts screaming for me to run, I knew I had to find out what lay beyond. I stepped forward, my heart pounding louder with every breath I took. The soft glow from the door flickered like a candle flame, dancing shadows across the corridor walls. I hesitated, unsure of what awaited me. As I approached, I could feel an almost magnetic pull, tugging at my very being. My fingers brushed against the doorframe, and I paused, preparing myself to peek through the crack. I called out, my voice breaking the heavy silence. "Hello? Is anyone there?" No response. Just the silence deepening around me. My instinct screamed that stepping through that door might be a mistake. But the feeling of urgency nagged at my thoughts. I needed answers, and there was a small chance I might find them there. I pushed the door open wider. It creaked, the noise echoing back at me from the depths of what lay ahead. The moment I stepped inside, a rush of cold air enveloped me, pulling my breath short. The room was dimly lit, with a single bulb hanging low from the ceiling, casting an eerie glow on the space. As my eyes adjusted, I took in the sight before me. The room looked like a makeshift library. Shelves lined the walls, filled with dusty books and old trinkets. An ancient-looking desk stood in the center, cluttered with papers, and on the wall hung an odd collection of photographs. I was drawn to one picture in particular. It showed a group of people I didn't recognize. They were smiling, holding up a strange key that looked identical to the pendant I had found earlier. As I leaned in closer, I felt a strange unease wash over me. Their smiles felt wrong, almost too wide, their eyes glaring into the camera with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. Rattled, I turned to leave but caught sight of something shiny on the floor. I bent down and picked it up, a small silver key. Holding it felt significant, like it was a missing piece to a puzzle I hadn't realized I was part of. I had no time to ponder its meaning. A soft sound from behind sent my heart racing again. I looked back toward the doorway, and my stomach dropped. The door had swung shut, sealing me inside the room. Panic set in. My fingertips fumbled for the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. "Open what must be opened," I muttered, recalling the pendant's inscription. Was there something there that needed releasing? I felt a growing urgency as the air grew thicker around me. Suddenly, the light overhead flickered violently, and the photographs began to shift on the wall, rearranging themselves into something more sinister. Gripped by dread, I dropped the key, backing away as the shadows deepened, swallowing the glow. I felt like I was losing touch with reality. But then I noticed a book on the edge of the desk. The binding was cracked, and it looked important. I needed to understand what was happening. Just as I reached for it, the whisper came again, clearer now. "Mark." The voice wrapped around me like a serpent, sending icy chills straight into my bones. I turned to face the noise, a mounting dread welling up inside me. There was something in the room with me, something dangerous, and it was waiting, I took a step back, my eyes darting around the room in search of any clue about the voice's origin. The shadows felt alive, twisting and turning just beyond my line of sight. I was about to call out again when a sudden crash erupted from the left corner of the room. I jumped, instinctively shouldering the desk for support. The sound had come from a collection of boxes stacked precariously high. One toppled over, spilling its contents across the floor. Old maps, tattered books, and strange artifacts scattered around my feet. I felt another wave of panic wash over me, overshadowing the creeping curiosity. I needed to get out of there. "Mark," the voice hissed again, more insistent this time. It echoed in a way that made my skin crawl. I forced myself to focus. Was it possible the voice was trying to communicate, or was it a threat? I hesitated but could see a glimmer beneath the piles of debris. One item caught my eye. Carefully, I knelt down and began to sift through the mess. My fingers brushed against a faded photograph, half buried. I pulled it free and gasped. It was the same group of people from the earlier picture, but this time a shadowy figure loomed behind them, its face obscured. Suddenly, a chill swept across the room, making the air feel thick as ice. I glanced back at the door and felt a pang of terror. I was still trapped, but now I could feel that something unseen was inching closer. My heart raced, a primal instinct urging me to escape while the way was still open. Gritting my teeth, I stood up and hurried to the desk. I had to grab that book before I lost my nerve. As I reached for it, something brushed against my shoulder. I spun around, ready to scream, but there was nothing, just emptiness. Then I heard it, a low growl emanating from the shadows. My breath caught in my throat, panic clawing at my insides. Whatever was in here with me was no longer hiding. It was watching. I grabbed the book and opened it quickly. The pages were brittle, filled with elaborately drawn illustrations and incomprehensible text. My eyes flitted over a drawing of an ornate keyhole, one that looked strikingly similar to the key I had found. My fingers lingered over the page. I felt warmth radiating from it, almost inviting me to understand. I flipped further, skimming through more frantic sketches of the very same shadowy figure, its outline growing darker with each page turn. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to breathe. Open what must be opened, I thought again, but how? The shadows felt closer now, the air crackling with tension. Desperation clawed at me. I stumbled back toward the door. Could I force it open? But something suddenly stopped me cold. The key on the ground shone with a strange light, illuminating whispers that filled the space around me, urging me on. I picked it up once more. Holding it tight, I felt a surge of energy flow through me. I turned to the book again, realizing this was my chance. I might be able to unlock whatever secret lay hidden within those pages. But just as I opened my mouth to call out, the lights flickered violently again. With a deafening snap, the light bulb shattered, plunging me into darkness. My body tensed, my breath shallow. I was no longer alone, and whatever was in the room with me was ready to strike. I stood frozen in the darkness, clutching the book and the key tight to my chest. The growling sound that had echoed through the room now seemed to reverberate around me, a haunting reminder that whatever was lurking in the shadows was very real. I could barely breathe. I tried to remember the way the door had felt. I took a cautious step back, reaching for the doorknob, but the darkness almost felt like a living thing, wrapping around me, restricting my movements. Was the door still there? Any semblance of courage fled as I fumbled blindly in the blackness. Then the whispers returned, swirling around me like a sinister breeze. They seemed to come from every direction, all at once, low and insistent, urging me to leave, to stay, to uncover the truth. It was maddening. I tried to focus on the book once more, the words blurring together, but I needed to know what they meant. Open what must be opened, I mumbled again, more to myself than anything else. I lifted the book closer, hoping that maybe the light from the key would help. But all I felt was deafening silence, interrupted only by the distant growl that felt like it was drawing nearer. Suddenly the sound of movement broke the stillness. Something shifted in the corner. I spun around, my heart racing. A soft scrape was followed by a low thud. I took a careful step toward it, hoping beyond hope that my imagination was playing tricks on me. But then I heard a whisper, a voice distinct among the mutterings. Mark. Every hair on my body stood on edge. I wasn't just frightened, I was terrified. The voice was no longer just a sound, it had a face. A flicker of movement caught my attention again, and I squinted, trying to pierce through the blackness. My stomach twisted as the vague outline of a figure began to form, its shape shifting with the shadows. It was time to act. With shaking hands, I raised the key, its shine casting shadows on the floor. I had to find something to unlock. The book spoke of openings, but where? Thoughts raced through my mind, battling fear and a desperate need for answers. Then it struck me, the keyhole from the book. I glanced around, my heart pounding. Was there something in the room that matched that description? My instincts screamed to search, but I felt paralyzed by the lurking presence. The whispers grew louder, urging action, urging me onward. Find it, they seemed to say, as if I were in a waking nightmare. That's when I saw it. In the far corner, partially hidden behind a stack of boxes, something glinted, a small, ornate door, barely visible, almost blending into the wall. Panic flickered within me. Could this be what I was looking for? Suddenly, the figure shifted again, moving closer. I stumbled toward the door, desperation flooding my senses. The doorknob glimmered, and as I reached for it, I could feel the temperature drop further. I hesitated. Should I? Before I could decide, a chilling wind swept past, followed by another growl. This time it was so close I could have sworn I felt breath on my neck. With a sudden burst of courage, I pressed the key into the lock, praying for something to happen. And then, the door creaked open. The door swung open slowly, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. I could barely see, but the air that wafted up was thick and musty, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. My heart pounded loudly in my ears, battling the echoes of the growl that still lingered in the air. With an instinctual push, I stepped inside, compelled by an urge I couldn't understand. The door creaked shut behind me, and the weight of silence fell over me like a heavy blanket. I glanced back, but the door had vanished into the wall, leaving me feeling trapped. It was just me and the darkness below, and as I made my way down the stairs, my pulse quickened with each step. I reached for the railing, but it felt slick and cold beneath my fingers. The shadows danced around me, and every creak in the floor felt like a warning. The whispers came back, louder now, wrapping around me like a twisted melody. "Mark," they called again, and I quickened my pace, unwilling to let the voice haunt me further. At the bottom of the stairs, I found myself in a small room. Bookshelves lined the walls, crammed with dusty volumes, countless secrets hidden among their spines. In the center stood an old table, covered in what looked like scattered notes and strange trinkets. Intrigued yet terrified, I stepped deeper into the room. As I brushed past the shelves, I caught sight of something glinting atop the table, a small dagger with an ornate hilt. I reached out instinctively. The metal felt cold, but I could sense it had significance. But before I could grasp it, something crashed nearby, sending a shock of fear coursing through me. I whirled around to see a shadowy figure darting along the far wall. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice trembling. The whispers turned into a cacophony, echoing my fear. The shadows shifted, forming again that indistinct figure from before. It was closer now, only a thin sliver of space separating us. The memories of the growling came rushing back, and I felt sweat bead on my forehead. I turned back to the table, desperate to keep my focus. I grabbed the dagger, its weight surprisingly balanced in my hand. I instinctively backed toward the wall as the figure moved closer. The whispers rose to a near scream, suffocating my thoughts. "Find him," the voice directed, but I was unsure who or what I was meant to find. In a panic, I scanned the notes on the table. They were written in a shaky hand, filled with sketches of figures and symbols I didn't understand. However, one line stood out. "To claim the truth, you must confront the past." Just then, something heavy crashed to the floor behind me. An old trunk. It jolted open, revealing a collection of faded photographs and an old locket that looked familiar. My breath caught in my throat as recognition washed over me. These images were of my family, ones long buried in memories I didn't want to revisit. Suddenly, the shadow lunged forward, and in that instant I realized I wasn't just uncovering old truths. I was unearthing something even darker. With that thought, everything went black. I gasped, unable to comprehend what was happening. Where was I now? The panic surged again as I grappled with a reality that was shifting in front of me. Before I could gather myself, the whispers turned into a roar of voices, drowning me in their demands. I hoped for clarity, but all I could feel was dread. I had opened the door, but what had I really let in? I jolted awake, blinking against the dim light that filtered through a cracked window. The air felt colder here, and I shivered. My surroundings had completely changed. Gone was the dusty room filled with books and whispers. Instead, I found myself in a small cabin, rustic yet unfamiliar. Panic coursed through me again. This looked like a refuge, but something didn't feel right. I stood and moved cautiously, taking in my surroundings. The worn wooden floor creaked under my feet. A fireplace lay cold, with ashes adorning the base like forgotten memories. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I glanced around and noticed a door at the far side of the room, slightly ajar. An uneasy sense of dread settled in my stomach. Mustering my courage, I approached it. The whispers had faded, but their weight lingered, urging me to explore. As I creaked the door open, a horrifying sight met my eyes, an endless expanse of snow-covered woods. The trees loomed tall and foreboding, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. I stepped outside, the cold air slamming into me. My breath formed clouds as I ventured further, instinctively seeking something, though I couldn't say what. The stillness was eerie, amplifying every sound. Twigs snapped underfoot, and the distant rustle of branches put me on edge. Somewhere in the back of my mind I felt the growl resurface, warning me of a lurking threat. That's when I saw it. A figure standing between the trees, partially concealed by shadows. My heart raced as I squinted, trying to decipher the shape. It was human, but something was off. The edges seemed distorted, almost as if the figure was flickering like a faulty light. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely breaking through the thick silence. The figure didn't respond, didn't move. Instead, it pointed into the woods, toward a path I hadn't noticed before, barely outlined by the snow. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the urge to follow was too potent to resist. I stepped towards the path, each step cracking the ice beneath. A terrifying thought flickered through my mind. What if this was all a trap? Would the shadows claim me again? But the thought of the figure pulled me forward, and as I walked deeper, the air grew heavier. Then a low growl echoed from behind me. I froze, my heart thudding in my chest. I slowly turned around. The figure had vanished, leaving behind a suffocating silence. The growl came again, closer this time, sounding almost like a warning but laced with hunger. Panic surged through me as I realized I was not alone in these woods. Glaring into the trees, I searched for the source of the noise. The shadows twisted unnaturally, not merely dark, but alive. Just as I started to back away, I caught a glimpse of it, a pair of eyes, glowing from within the dark, surveying me like prey. Time froze. I had to make a choice. Confront whatever lurked or flee blindly back to the cabin. I felt the weight of the dagger in my pocket, its cold metal reassuring against the panic tightening in my chest. The figure might have been a ghost, but the threat was all too real. I tightened my grip around the dagger. I was done running. Whatever fractured part of my past had steered me here would be faced. With a deep breath, I stepped forward into the shadows, ready to confront what had been haunting me. But as I moved closer, I heard another voice rise over the growl, the faint echo of my own name once more. Mark. The darkness framed my path, and I stepped toward it, ready or not. I stepped deeper into the shadows, the night air crackling with tension. The glowing eyes watched from the darkness, drawing me in like a moth to flame. I gripped the dagger tightly, ready to defend myself against whatever lurked just beyond my sight. Mark. The soft whisper echoed again, now sounding closer, somehow both inviting and sinister. I moved cautiously, each step punctuated by the crunch of snow underfoot. The world felt warped, like I had crossed into a realm that existed outside of time and space, one that seemed to thrive on fear. My heart pounded in my ears. Panic threatened to seize me, but I couldn't turn back now. Whatever awaited me was tethered to my past, and I needed answers, not just for me, but for those whose faces I had seen in the photographs. As I forged ahead, the atmosphere thickened, and shadows coiled around me like a living shroud. I pressed on until I emerged into a small clearing, surrounded by towering trees. In the center stood a stone pedestal, etched with the same intricate patterns I had seen in the book back at the cabin. My breath hitched. The parallels in this twisted fate were inescapable. I approached the pedestal, noticing something resting atop it, a small, ornate box. My pulse quickened. This had to be it. Whatever secrets it held could explain the strange happenings, the growling creature, and the haunting whispers that had plagued me. I reached for it, hesitating for a moment, feeling the weight of history pressing against me. But as my fingers brushed against the box, the atmosphere flickered like wind across the surface of water. The shadows stirred, and the growl grew nearer, almost a snarl now, a warning fueled by rage. "Mark," the voice cried out again, a desperate plea piercing through the ominous sound. I opened the box and peered inside. It was empty, but its insides shimmered with a soft light, as though it held potential locked away. My heart raced. What did it want me to understand? Suddenly the air shifted. I could hear not just the growls, but a chorus of voices all speaking at once, flooding my mind with their chaotic demands. Panicking, I dropped the box, and it clattered against the ground, spilling out a shimmering mist that swirled into the air. The shadows recoiled for a moment, revealing the creature behind them, a swirling mass of darkness with those glowing eyes, standing still, waiting. With a sudden surge of resolve, I straightened my back and pulled the dagger free. "What do you want from me?" I shouted into the void, my voice trembling but defiant. The growl grew louder, vibrating through my bones, but I held my ground, despite the fear that threatened to swallow me whole. The mist began to take shape, slowly coalescing into forms I'd seen before. The photographs of that long-ago gathering. The people smiled at me, their eyes wide and inviting, yet tinged with sorrow. In that moment, I finally understood. They weren't just memories, they were pieces of a larger story wrapped in shadows and illusions. They had been calling to me, pleading for acknowledgement. "I see you," I shouted, determination filling my voice. "I won't run away anymore." The creature lunged, shadows surging toward me, but I clenched the dagger and took a step forward. "I'm here, let me in," I cried, and the growling ceased for the briefest moment. The figures wrapped themselves around me, their features softening as if inviting me to see the truth. Suddenly the ground shook beneath my feet. That's when I felt it, the deep pulse of ancestral strength rising within. The whispers hissed, then quieted. They had begun to unravel, yearnings intermingling as if my acceptance had freed something trapped in fear. With a final battle cry, I threw the dagger into the earth at the center of the pedestal. The air shimmered, a crackling surge of energy spreading out before me. Everything erupted into a blinding light, enveloping the clearing. And then, everything shifted. I blinked and found myself back in the cabin, sunlight streaming through the windows. The warmth surrounded me like a forgotten embrace. The echoes of the growls and whispers faded into the background, replaced by the soft sound of birds chirping outside. Confusion washed over me. The remnants of the shadowy creature a distant memory, and yet the weight of its presence lingered. I glanced down at my hands. The pendant lay sparkling on the table, untouched. The shadows that had encircled me seemed to dissolve in the glow of day. But I couldn't shake the questions. What had been real? What had I awakened? With a deep breath, I steeled myself to confront the mystery still curling in the corners of my mind. I walked toward the window, gazing out over the snow-covered landscape. Had I truly escaped? The cabin felt both familiar and foreign. I knew I had taken a step into the unknown, but the questions remained, lingering like shadows waiting to be addressed. I had opened a door, yet even now, I couldn't tell if it had led me away from danger or deeper into the heart of what haunted me. And was that growl a warning or an invitation? Only time would tell.